It was freezing that morning in Redwood Falls. A 7-year-old girl sat on the curb outside a small-town diner, clutching her starving German shepherd to her chest. In front of her, a piece of torn cardboard read, "Sell my dog, $2, please feed him." They hadn't eaten in 3 days. The dog, weak but still loyal, nudged his empty bowl toward her, refusing to eat unless she did. Then, the sound of engines echoed through the fog, 6 bikers pulling into the lot. When their leader knelt down beside the trembling girl, he asked one question that changed everything. What he discovered that day would leave an entire town in tears and remind the world that miracles still exist. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. The morning fog rolled thick through the quiet streets of Redwood Falls, swallowing the light and dulling the sound of distant traffic. The air was cold enough to bite, clinging to the skin like damp paper. On the cracked sidewalk near the edge of a diner's parking lot sat a 7-year-old girl named Emily Carter, her small frame swallowed by a faded denim jacket 2 sizes too big. Her hair, once the color of summer wheat, was matted and tangled from nights spent sleeping in an old car. Beside her lay a thin German shepherd named Ranger, ribs visible beneath his gray-black coat, ears drooping, eyes watchful and weary. In front of them, propped against a half-crushed backpack, was a torn piece of cardboard scrawled with childish handwriting. "Sell dog, $2, please feed him." Emily's lips were pale from hunger and cold, but she kept whispering to Ranger as if words alone could keep him alive. The dog, perhaps 3 years old, had once been strong and alert, trained to protect and obey. Now his paws trembled each time he shifted his weight. Still, whenever a car passed, he lifted his head, eyes full of cautious hope, as if every stranger might be the one who would save them both. Emily's stomach twisted painfully. She hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. Her last meal had been a packet of stale crackers shared with Ranger, and even then, the dog had nudged most of it back toward her with his nose. She looked down at him now, guilt and love fighting inside her chest. A tear slipped down her cheek. "You're supposed to eat," she whispered, stroking the rough fur behind his ear. "You always take care of me, but I can't take care of you anymore." Ranger licked her hand in response, his tail twitching weakly across the pavement. The gesture made her throat tighten. It felt like an apology from someone who had nothing left to give. She thought about her father, Jack Carter, a broad-shouldered man with kind gray eyes and the smell of engine grease always clinging to his clothes. Before he got sick, he used to lift her high above his head and call her "my little light." Now the only light she could see was the faint reflection of passing headlights in the puddles beside her. After he died, everything had collapsed. Her mother's laughter, their home, their dinners that used to smell like cinnamon and coffee. Emily's mother, Lisa Carter, was a tall, slender woman with the sort of quiet beauty that sadness only deepened. Her auburn hair had begun to lose its shine, tied back hastily each morning as she searched for work that would take her, any work at all. Her hands, once soft, were now cracked from scrubbing and cold. Every night she told Emily things would be fine, and every morning the lie grew harder to say. For the last week, Lisa had been too weak to get out of the car. She hadn't eaten properly in days. Emily had told herself she could fix things, sell something, buy food, surprise her mother. That was why she was here now, clutching Ranger's leash made of frayed rope, waiting for mercy to stop somewhere along this forgotten road. A gust of wind cut through the fog, bringing with it the smell of bacon and burnt coffee from the diner. Emily's stomach growled. Ranger raised his head again, ears twitching, eyes scanning the street like a soldier on watch. Then, from the distance, came another sound, deeper, louder, rhythmic, the rumble of engines. 6 Harley-Davidsons emerged from the mist like black horses, chrome gleaming under the gray light. They rolled into the diner's parking lot in formation, engines idling low, the sound vibrating through the ground beneath Emily's shoes. On the back of each leather vest was a patch stitched in silver, "Steel Saints." The man leading them swung his leg off his bike first. Cole Rivers was in his early 40s, tall, shoulders broad beneath a weathered leather jacket. His beard was trimmed close to his jaw, streaked with gray, and a faint scar crossed his left eyebrow, a mark left by shrapnel during his service as a Marine in Afghanistan. He had the bearing of someone who had seen too much to fear anything small. His eyes, cold steel blue, swept the parking lot and stopped on the girl and her dog. For a brief second, something in him shifted. The fog, the cold, the sound of his brother's engines, all of it fell away. He saw not a stranger, but a reflection of every broken thing he'd tried to forget. The children starving in dusty villages overseas, the ones he couldn't save. He approached slowly, boots scraping against gravel. Ranger stood up. Legs trembling but stance firm, a low growl rumbling from his chest. His tail was stiff, his body angled protectively in front of the girl. Cole stopped a few feet away and lowered himself to one knee, meeting the dog's eyes rather than challenging him. "Easy, buddy," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt her." Emily's small hand clutched Ranger's rope tighter. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Please, sir, I'm selling him. He's hungry. We both are." She pointed at the cardboard sign, her eyes filling with tears. $2, that's all." Cole glanced at the sign, then back at her. The world seemed to narrow until there was nothing but the girl's trembling lip and the desperate steadiness of the dog beside her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily." "And this is Ranger," she whispered. Ranger shifted his gaze between them, as if judging the man's intent. Cole slowly extended his hand, palm up. Ranger hesitated, sniffed, then rested his muzzle briefly in Cole's palm before sitting down again beside the girl. That single gesture, cautious trust, hit Cole harder than any battlefield memory. He took a slow breath. "Why are you out here, Emily? Where's your mom?" "She's sleeping, in the car, down the street. She hasn't eaten and Emily's words broke apart. She'd pressed her face into Ranger's neck, shoulders shaking. Cole felt the old instinct rise inside him, the one that had made him drag bleeding men out of burning vehicles long after orders told him to retreat. He turned his head toward the diner, where his crew watched in silence. The tallest, Duke, a grizzled man with a long braid of gray hair and a face carved by wind and time, gave him a questioning look. Mariah, the only woman among them, with sharp green eyes and a tattoo of angel wings across her arms, folded her hands, waiting. Cole looked back at the girl, his voice quiet but certain. "You keep your $2, Emily." She blinked up at him. "Then, you won't take him?" "No," Cole said, "but I'll make sure both of you eat." Ranger lifted his head, ears pricking slightly at the sound of the man's tone. It was calm, steady, the kind of voice dogs trusted by instinct. Emily didn't understand why tears kept falling even though someone had finally said something kind. Behind them, the fog thickened again, wrapping the parking lot in gray silence. Cole stood, eyes still on the girl and her loyal shepherd. Something inside him told him this was only the beginning, that fate had rolled its engines into his life the same way his Harley had rolled into this lot. And somewhere down the street, in a battered car fogged with breath and frost, a woman named Lisa Carter stirred awake, unaware that everything was about to change. The fog lifted slowly from Redwood Falls, revealing the brittle light of a winter morning. The sun looked pale and unsure, as if afraid to touch the world below. In the corner of the diner's parking lot, Cole Rivers stood beside the little girl and her German shepherd, trying to piece together what had brought them to this point. The smell of coffee and frying bacon drifted from inside Rosie's diner, warm and familiar. But the scene before him felt like another kind of battlefield. One without uniforms, one fought with hunger instead of bullets. Cole crouched again, his gloved hand resting on his knee. "Emily," he said softly, "let's go get your mom, yeah? We'll make sure she's okay." She nodded, but her shoulders trembled. She seemed both relieved and frightened by the sudden kindness. Ranger followed every movement, his dark amber eyes sharp even in exhaustion. He limped slightly, one paw still sore from days walking on frozen asphalt. When Cole rose, the dog stepped between him and the girl, not aggressive, only cautious, the kind of protectiveness that came from loyalty, not fear. Down the street, Cole spotted the battered silver Chevy parked near a dumpster. Frost covered the windshield, and condensation fogged the side windows. He motioned for his brothers to wait by the bikes. "Duke, Mariah, keep an eye here," he muttered, voice low and steady. Duke, tall and wiry with deep crow's feet carved by time, gave a nod. Mariah crossed her tattooed arms, her expression unreadable. As Cole and Emily approached the car, a faint movement stirred inside. A woman jolted upright in the driver's seat, eyes wide. Lisa Carter looked older than her 32 years. Her face was drawn thin, the skin under her eyes bruised by sleepless nights. Her auburn hair, once neat, was tangled and streaked with gray strands. She wore a faded wool coat buttoned to her chin, sleeves frayed, and clutched a child's blanket in her lap. "Mom?" Emily called, voice cracking. Lisa blinked rapidly, confusion flashing across her pale green eyes before recognition hit. She flung open the door and stumbled out, nearly losing her balance. "Emily!" Her voice trembled between relief and panic. She ran to her daughter, pulling her into her arms so tightly that Emily's breath hitched. Then she noticed the man standing behind them. Tall, broad-shouldered, the type of man a mother alone with her child might fear on instinct. Cole raised both hands, palms open. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I'm not here to hurt you. Your daughter asked for help. She was just trying to feed your dog." Lisa's eyes darted from Cole to Ranger. The dog stood close beside Emily, tail stiff, gaze fixed on his owner's face as if awaiting permission to act. Lisa's lips parted, then closed again. Her voice was rough from dehydration. "We don't need charity." Cole nodded once. "Understood. But you could use breakfast." She hesitated, looking past him to the group of bikers by the diner. They looked rough, dressed in leather and denim, bearded and heavy-booted, the kind of men she'd been taught to avoid. Yet something in the way they waited, not mocking, not impatient, felt different. Inside Rosie's diner, the heat was almost overwhelming after the cold. The woman behind the counter, Rosie Alvarez, was in her 50s, short and round with silver hair tied back in a red bandana. She had the kind of face that could turn stern in a second, but her brown eyes softened when she saw the trio walk in. "Cole Rivers," she said, voice thick with familiarity. "You bringing strays again?" Cole smiled faintly. "Just one girl, one mom, and one good dog." Rosie sighed but gestured to a booth near the window. "Sit. I'll get you coffee and pancakes." Lisa's hands shook as she tried to remove her gloves. When the food came, she whispered a quiet thank you but didn't eat until Emily and Ranger had taken the first bites. The dog devoured scrambled eggs with slow reverence, as if remembering what food felt like. Rosie watched from behind the counter, pretending not to wipe at her eyes. When they'd eaten enough to breathe again, Cole leaned back against the booth. "Lisa," he said quietly, "you don't owe me an explanation, but I need to know if there's someone who can help you. Family, friends?" She looked out the window, gaze distant. "No one left. My husband Jack died last year. Cancer." Her fingers curled around her cup. "We lost the insurance, then the apartment. The landlord said rent went up. We had nowhere to go." Cole studied her, the soldier in him recognizing the calm voice people used when they'd run out of ways to cry. "What was your husband's job?" "Warehouse driver, Mason Freight Company," she said, and something flickered in Cole's eyes. He'd heard that name before, a logistics firm run by Gerald Pritchard, a man whose reputation for cutting corners was legendary even among contractors. "His boss fired him when he got too sick to work," Lisa continued, "said he was unreliable." Cole exhaled slowly, jaw tightening. He'd met that kind of cruelty before, men who weaponized legality to destroy lives. At the other end of the diner, Mariah had slid into a seat, pretending to read the menu but listening. Duke sat beside her, sipping coffee. "He's got that look again," Duke muttered. "The look he had in Kandahar before he punched that major." Mariah's lip twitched. "Then maybe somebody deserves a punch." Back at the booth, Ranger rested his head on Emily's lap. The dog's breathing was slow but steady, his tail thumping softly against the seat whenever she stroked his fur. The waitress came by with a bowl of water, and Ranger lapped it gratefully. Rosie crouched beside him, scratching his neck. "You're a handsome one," she murmured. "Got a good spirit in you," Emily smiled for the first time that morning. "He saved me once," she said. "When we still had a house, I ran into the street in a car, almost—" Her voice trailed off. "Dad said he was the best thing that ever happened to us." Lisa's eyes shimmered. Jack trained police dogs before he got sick. Ranger was one of the rejects. Well, too protective, they said. Too emotional. Cole smiled faintly. "Sounds like the right kind of dog to me." For a few minutes, the table was quiet. Outside, the fog had lifted entirely, leaving behind a pale blue sky. Cole looked at the mother and daughter in front of him and knew he couldn't just walk away. But he also knew fixing this wasn't going to be simple. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card. Stone's Auto and Cycle Repair. "There's an apartment above my shop," he said. "It's not much, but it's warm. You can stay there for a few days until you figure things out." Lisa hesitated. "Why?" "Because your daughter tried to sell her dog to keep him alive," Cole said quietly. "And I can't forget that." Something inside her seemed to crumble. She looked at Emily, then at Ranger, who lifted his head as if sensing the change in her heartbeat. Finally, she nodded. "Just a few days." Cole stood, signaling to his crew. Outside, the rumble of engines started again. Ranger followed Emily to the door, pausing only once to glance back at Rosie, who waved from behind the counter. As they stepped into the crisp air, Lisa shielded her eyes from the light. For the first time in months, she felt the faintest spark of safety. Yet somewhere deep down, an unease lingered. A shadow she couldn't name, like the sound of thunder still echoing long after the storm had passed. And behind them, in a booth by the window, Mariah watched as Cole helped the family onto his bike. She turned to Duke and said softly, "You think he knows what he's getting into?" Duke shrugged, eyes following the retreating trio. "No," he said, "but I think fate does." By the time the afternoon sun slipped behind the grain silos of Redwood Falls, the air had turned brittle again. Cole Rivers parked his Harley outside the auto shop he owned on the east side of town. The sign above the door read, "Stone's Auto and Cycle Repair." The paint faded, but the name carried weight, respect earned through years of honest work. The sound of engines died one by one as the rest of the Steel Saints arrived, the low rumble fading into the stillness of the narrow street. The small apartment above the shop was nothing fancy. One bedroom, a creaky sofa, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of oil and coffee. But when Lisa Carter stepped inside with Emily and the dog, it felt almost unreal. The warmth from the old space heater hit her face, and for a moment she swayed on her feet. Emily dropped her bag by the couch and looked around with wide eyes, as though she'd stepped into another world. Ranger padded in beside her, sniffing the corners, tail wagging slowly, cautious but curious. Cole leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "It's not much," he said, "but it's dry and it's safe." Lisa turned to him, her green eyes still rimmed with fatigue. "Safe," she repeated softly, like testing the word on her tongue. She hadn't said it aloud in months. Downstairs, the other members of the Steel Saints had gathered in the workshop. The place was a wide, open space of metal and concrete, a shrine to grease and discipline. Tools hung in precise order along the walls, and the air smelled of engine oil and cigarette smoke. Duke, the tall, grizzled veteran, lit a match with a flick of his thumb, his gray braid hanging over one shoulder. "You sure about this, Cole?" he asked. "Taking in a woman and kid, you know it won't stay simple." Cole shrugged, pulling off his gloves. "Nothing worth doing ever is." Mariah Vega, the only woman in the crew, leaned against a workbench. Her sharp green eyes missed nothing. Her dark hair was cut short, practical, her forearms tattooed with angel wings and Latin scripture. "I like the kid," she said. "Got guts. That dog, too. Reminds me of my Kilo." Her tone softened at the name. She'd lost her German shepherd in a house fire years before, the same fire that had taken her husband. "Family's family," Cole said simply. He glanced upstairs, where Emily's laughter was faint but clear for the first time since morning. That evening, as the others left, Cole climbed the narrow stairs and found Lisa sitting at the window, staring at the streetlights flickering on. Ranger lay at her feet, head resting on his paws. "He won't sleep until you do," Cole said quietly. Lisa gave a small smile. "Neither will I." She hesitated before speaking again. "You didn't have to do this, you know. Help us." Cole leaned against the wall. The dim light cut across his face, revealing the faint scar under his left eye, the kind that looked like it came from something sharp, or someone desperate. "A long time ago," he said, "someone helped me when I didn't deserve it. Feels like my turn." Lisa looked at him, sensing something heavy behind those calm words. "Was it the war?" He nodded once. "Afghanistan, 2007, lost a whole unit one night. Spent the next year trying to lose myself, too. His voice didn't break, but it roughened like gravel under boots. Then a man I didn't know, a mechanic like me, pulled me out of the gutter, gave me a wrench, told me to fix something other than myself. Been trying to pay it forward ever since. Silence filled the small room. Ranger lifted his head, watching the two humans with quiet understanding. Cole smiled faintly and crouched to scratch behind the dog's ear. "You got a good soldier here," he said. "He's all we have left," Lisa murmured. Later, after Emily fell asleep curled up under a borrowed blanket, Lisa stood by the window again. Outside, the streetlight buzzed faintly, casting a cone of pale orange light on the wet pavement. Ranger sat beside her, his reflection mirrored in the glass. "You think we'll ever get back what we lost?" she whispered to no one in particular. Cole's voice came from the doorway. "Sometimes you don't get it back," he said. "You build something new instead." The next morning came too early. The shop opened at 7, and the sound of tools and engines filled the air. Cole handed Emily a sandwich wrapped in paper, then turned to Ranger, who sat patiently by the counter. "How about you, soldier? You good with eggs and bacon?" Ranger barked once, tail wagging, the spark of life returning to his eyes. While Emily fed him, Cole reviewed an invoice from Mason Freight. The logo, a silver M over a red stripe, caught his attention. It was the same company Lisa had mentioned the day before. He frowned. The paper wasn't for work. It was a maintenance order for a truck belonging to Mason Freight, dated only a week earlier. He'd done the job himself. "So they're still operating out of Redwood?" he muttered. When Lisa came downstairs, he showed her the paper, her face drained of color. "That's them," she said. "Pritchard's company." Cole's jaw tightened. Then maybe it's time someone had a word with Pritchard. That afternoon, he and Duke drove out to the industrial district where Mason Freight's warehouse loomed, a box of steel and concrete surrounded by chain-link fencing. The air smelled of diesel and cold metal. A security guard stepped forward, Earl Jenkins, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a gray mustache and the uneasy posture of someone paid too little to care too much. "We closed," he grunted, chewing on a toothpick. Cole flashed him a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then you won't mind me leaving a message for your boss." Earl frowned. "You a cop?" "Worse," Duke said. "Deadpan. A mechanic with free time." Inside the dim office, Cole noticed a framed photo of Gerald Pritchard. Clean-shaven, slick hair, the kind of man who smiled for cameras, but not people. He also noticed a stack of eviction notices bearing the same signature. His stomach turned cold. Back at the shop, Lisa was pacing, nerves tight. "Did you find him?" she asked. "Not yet," Cole replied, "but I found his trail." He looked toward Emily, who was playing fetch with Ranger in the yard. The dog leaped gracefully, catching the rubber ball mid-air. The sight made Cole's chest ease, if only for a moment. As dusk fell, Mariah returned with news. "You're not going to like this," she said. "Pritchard's tied to more than just Mason Freight. He's part of a property group. Same one raising rents all over the county." She dropped a folder onto the counter. "And guess who handles the legal paperwork?" "Harold Givens." Lisa froze. "That's our landlord." Cole rubbed his temples. "Then it's not coincidence. It's a system." The air in the room felt heavy, electric. Ranger let out a low growl, sensing the shift in mood. Cole glanced down at him, then back at Lisa. "They took everything from you because they thought nobody would fight back." His voice hardened. "They were wrong." Outside, the night deepened. A storm gathered over Redwood Falls, thunder rumbling somewhere beyond the hills. Inside the small apartment above the shop, the first sparks of a plan began to form, and none of them yet knew how far it would reach or how dangerous it would become. A cold rain swept over Redwood Falls that night, turning the streets slick and silver under the dim yellow lamps. Inside Stone's auto and cycle, the steady tapping of raindrops on the tin roof mixed with the hum of the fluorescent lights. Cole Rivers stood at his workbench, hands planted on a stack of papers, documents Mariah had unearthed connecting Gerald Pritchard's logistics empire to Harold Givens's real estate schemes. His jaw flexed with the kind of restrained fury only men who'd seen too much injustice could carry. Lisa Carter sat on a nearby stool, the warm glow from a desk lamp softening her worn features. Her auburn hair, still tangled at the ends, framed a face too tired to belong to 32 years. Across the room, Emily played quietly with Ranger, tossing him a small rubber ball. The German Shepherd, healthier now, fur fuller and eyes brighter, caught it mid-air every time, a soldier reborn. He was alert, ears flicking toward every sound, yet his demeanor around the Carters had softened into protectiveness rather than fear. Cole took a slow breath, then turned to the group assembled in the shop. Duke leaned against a motorcycle frame, long braid hanging over one shoulder, watching his leader with a veteran's patience. Mariah sat cross-legged on the counter, flipping through printed bank records. Reverend, whose real name was Samuel Brooks, a tall, dark-skinned man in his late 40s, stood with hands clasped like he was still in the pulpit. His face bore a faded burn scar down the left cheek, a souvenir from the house fire that had ended his ministry years before. His calm eyes carried the weight of faith, tested and tempered. Cole looked at them each in turn. "This isn't just about one family anymore," he said. "Pritchard and Givens have done this to dozens of others. We have proof, evictions, fake maintenance reports, shell companies laundering cash, but if we hand this to the law right now, it'll vanish into red tape. We need to make it visible." Mariah raised a brow. "Visible how? You planning to staple the paperwork to their front doors?" Cole smirked faintly. "Close." He nodded to Ghost, the quietest member of the Saints. Eli Ghost Navarro was a lean man in his 30s with a calm, watchful face and restless hands. A former Army communications tech turned cybersecurity freelancer, he wore wire-frame glasses that made him look too thoughtful for his tattoos. "Ghost's been digging," Cole continued. He found that Pritchard's company has a live public feed for investors, a webcast every Friday morning. If we get our evidence uploaded during that stream, we expose them in real time. Duke chuckled dryly. "You're turning this into a sermon and a street fight all at once." "Justice usually needs both," Reverend said. Lisa shifted uneasily. "If they find out you're helping us, they'll try to scare us," Cole interrupted. "Let them." He turned, his gaze toward the rain-spattered window. "I've been scared before. Didn't change a thing." The plan took shape in whispers and half-scribbled notes. Ghost worked silently at an old laptop, fingers moving fast, tracing networks and passwords through layers of firewalls. Mariah handled logistics, who would be where, how to time the upload. Duke would keep watch, his steady nerves and ex-cop instincts invaluable. Reverend would prepare statements from the victims willing to come forward, his voice giving weight to their truth. By midnight, the group disbanded to rest. Lisa stood by the door, watching them go. "You don't even know us," she said quietly. "Why are you risking this?" Cole paused as he pulled on his jacket. "Because somebody has to," he said simply. "And because your daughter reminds me what kind of world I want to live in." The next morning dawned gray but dry. The town was waking slow, coffee shops humming, trucks rumbling through puddles. In the apartment above the shop, Emily woke early and crept to the window, watching as Cole prepped his Harley. Ranger sat beside her, tail thumping gently. "We're not going to lose again, are we?" she whispered to the dog. Ranger leaned against her leg, eyes steady as if to say, "Not while I'm breathing." At 9 a.m., the Saints rolled out. Their engines broke the morning quiet like thunder. The plan was simple. Ghost would breach Mason Freight's online investor stream, uploading the financial documents live while Mariah broadcast the victims' testimonies through mirrored social accounts. Duke and Reverend would accompany Cole to Mason Freight headquarters to confront the men themselves, ensuring the story had faces, not just files. The headquarters loomed at the edge of town, a block of glass and concrete pretending to be respectable. Inside, the air smelled of money and disinfectant. The receptionist, a young woman with tired eyes and a forced smile, froze when she saw 6 leather-clad figures stride through the lobby. Cole approached the desk calmly. "Gerald Pritchard in?" She stammered. "He's in a meeting." "He's about to have another one," Duke said, voice like gravel. They found Pritchard on the top floor, standing in front of a wide glass window overlooking the parking lot. He was tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than Cole's entire shop. His hair was silvered at the temples, slicked back with precision. When he turned, His smile was practiced, corporate charm polished to a weapon's edge. "Mr. Rivers, is it? I've heard of your shop." "Good," Cole said. "Then you'll hear me clearly." He tossed a thick envelope onto the desk. Inside were printed copies of the forged leases, fake maintenance charges, eviction lists, all signed by Pritchard and notarized under Givens's name. Pritchard's eyes flicked over the papers, then back to Cole. His voice stayed calm, but a faint twitch betrayed irritation. "If you think threatening me will get you anything—" "Not threatening," Cole said. "Just showing you what the whole county's about to see." On cue, Ghost's upload went live. Across the building, computer screens flickered as the investor feed shifted from charts and numbers to scanned images of fraudulent documents. Pritchard's face drained of color. Downstairs, employees murmured, phones buzzed, the chaos spreading like fire through dry grass. Duke leaned closer, voice low. "You hear that? That's the sound of your empire crumbling." Pritchard's mask cracked. "You think this will last? I'll bury you in lawsuits." Cole stepped forward until only the desk separated them. "Try it. I've been through worse wars." By the time the police arrived, tipped off by Mariah's anonymous call, the building was in uproar. Givens appeared minutes later, face red, shouting legal threats no one believed. The officers, led by Detective Karen Holbrook, a stocky woman in her 40s with storm-gray eyes and a voice honed by years of dealing with liars, began collecting statements. She had short brown hair, a scar under her chin, and the patience of someone who'd clawed her way through 1,000 bureaucratic cover-ups. "Mr. Rivers," she said, flipping through the evidence folder, "looks like you've done half our job." "Just cleaning up the neighborhood," Cole replied. Outside, the Saints gathered by their bikes. The sky had cleared, revealing a stretch of blue that felt like promise. Lisa and Emily arrived soon after, Ranger trotting ahead, ears perked. When the girl saw Cole, she ran to him, flinging her arms around his waist. "We did it," she said breathlessly. Ranger barked once, as if in agreement. Cole looked over the horizon, where the storm clouds were finally breaking. "Not yet," he murmured. "This is just the start." And somewhere behind the tinted windows of a nearby sedan, a shadowed figure lifted a camera lens, watching, recording. The war wasn't over, it was only changing shape. The following weeks passed like the slow clearing of a storm. The name Mason Freight spread across news headlines from county to state level. Photographs of Gerald Pritchard in handcuffs became the morning paper's emblem of justice, finally done. Harold Givens was arrested days later at a private golf club in Denver, still wearing a silk vest and an expression of disbelief that his world could crumble so publicly. Detective Karen Holbrook handled the charges with surgical precision. Her stern professionalism and unflinching pursuit of truth made her something of a quiet hero in Redwood Falls. But while the town celebrated, Cole Rivers and the Steel Saints returned to quieter work, fixing engines, patching lives, keeping promises. In the small apartment above the shop, life took on rhythm again. Lisa Carter began working in the office downstairs, keeping the books organized and managing repair schedules. She had regained color in her face, and her once dull auburn hair glowed again under the morning light. There was still a trace of exhaustion around her eyes, but the fear that had haunted her movements was gone. Emily attended the local elementary school 3 blocks away. Always wearing the same faded denim jacket that had carried her through the worst days. She still looked small compared to other children, but her laughter came easier now, brighter, unburdened. Ranger trotted beside her each morning, his black and tan coat glossy, posture proud. The townsfolk had come to recognize him, the shepherd who never left the girl's side. One evening, Cole was locking up the garage when he noticed a man waiting across the street under a flickering street lamp. The stranger looked to be in his 50s, tall but slightly stooped, wearing a tan coat and a flat cap pulled low. When he stepped forward, the lamplight revealed a face lined deeply by time, with a short gray beard and eyes the color of old wood. Jack Morrison, an investigative journalist from the Denver Tribune. His voice was gravelly but calm. "You're the mechanic who brought down Pritchard, right?" Cole's instincts stiffened. Men with notebooks usually meant trouble. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Morrison," the man said, extending a weathered hand. "Used to cover corruption cases before I started writing about war veterans. Heard about you and your crew. Thought there might be a story left worth telling. He smiled faintly. One that doesn't end in blood. Cole hesitated, then nodded toward the diner across the street. Coffee's better than standing in the cold. Inside Rosie's diner, the familiar hum of conversation filled the air. Rosie Alvarez herself, in her usual red bandana, slid 2 mugs toward them with practiced ease. "You still stirring up ghosts, Cole?" she asked, half amused, half concerned. "Seems they keep finding me," he replied. Morrison pulled a recorder from his pocket but didn't turn it on. "I'm not here for, headlines," he said. "I want to write about what happens after justice, the aftermath nobody talks about, the people who survive." His gaze drifted toward the window, where Ranger lay outside the diner door, watching patiently. "That dog," Morrison added softly. "He's part of it, isn't he?" "Yeah," Cole said. "He's the reason any of this started. The girl tried to sell him for $2 because she couldn't watch him starve." He paused, eyes distant. "You see something like that, and it changes what you think this world deserves." Morrison nodded, jotting something on a small pad. Sometimes redemption's louder when it's quiet. Meanwhile, back at the shop, Emily and Lisa were decorating for Christmas. The scent of pine and machine oil mingled strangely but pleasantly in the air. Lisa hummed softly as she hung a string of mismatched lights around the window. Emily was busy helping Ranger unwrap his gift, an old leather collar restored and polished by Mariah. On the brass tag were engraved the words, "Guardian of the Saints." Ranger wagged his tail so hard the bells on the door jingled. Later that night, after the lights dimmed and the town fell silent under light snow, Cole found Lisa sitting outside on the steps wrapped in a blanket. "Can't sleep?" he asked, lighting a cigarette. She smiled faintly. "Haven't seen snowfall this quietly in years." Her voice had lost the tremor it once carried. "It almost feels like forgiveness." Cole exhaled a slow plume of smoke. "Funny thing about forgiveness," he said. "Sometimes it's the hardest thing we give ourselves." They sat in silence a while, watching flakes settle on Ranger's fur as he lay curled beside the door, the faint rise and fall of his chest, steady and sure. Then Lisa spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever miss it? The war?" Cole's eyes didn't move from the horizon. "No," he said, "but I miss the clarity. Out there, right and wrong were simple. Back here, it's all noise. Until I met you and your kid, you reminded me what's worth fighting for." She turned to look at him, something like warmth flickering across her face, but before she could reply, the sound of approaching tires cut through the quiet. A dark SUV rolled to a stop across the street, its headlights off. Ranger lifted his head immediately, ears pricked, body tense. Cole's hand instinctively found the wrench on the step beside him. The passenger door opened, and Detective Holbrook stepped out, raincoat wrapped tight against the cold. Her face was drawn, serious. "Evening," she said. "Didn't mean to spook you." Cole relaxed slightly, though Ranger didn't. "You working this late?" Holbrook nodded. "Always. Thought you should know. Pritchard's lawyers are filing appeals. There's talk of a missing witness. Someone's been snooping around the case files." Lisa stiffened. "Does that mean he could walk?" "Unlikely," Holbrook said, though her tone carried the hesitation of someone who'd seen miracles turn bad before. "But whoever's digging isn't doing it for the defense. You might want to keep an eye on your place." She glanced at Ranger. "Good thing you've got him." Cole smirked. "He bites harder than he looks." After she left, the street felt heavier, quieter. The snowfall had thickened, muting the world in white. Cole crouched beside Ranger, running a hand along the dog's back. "Looks like the storm's not done with us yet, partner." Ranger's ears flicked, amber eyes alert, gaze fixed on the receding taillights until they vanished into the dark. Inside, Emily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible but peaceful. Lisa watched from the doorway, one hand resting on the frame. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt strong. Not because the world had gotten easier, but because she wasn't standing alone. Cole rose, brushing snow from his shoulders. He looked up at the stars barely visible through the clouds. "Whatever comes next," he muttered, half to himself. We'll be ready. And somewhere deep in the valley, beyond the hum of engines and the whisper of snow, a distant light flickered, steady, defiant, refusing to go out. When storms pass, they don't erase the damage, they reveal what still stands. In Redwood Falls, what stood wasn't a building or a fortune, but faith, the quiet kind that lives in acts of compassion, in the courage to help a stranger, and in the love between a child and her dog. The miracle wasn't thunder or fire from heaven, it was a mechanic who stopped to listen, a little girl who refused to give up, a mother who kept believing, and a German shepherd who never abandoned hope. Maybe that's how God works most days, not through lightning bolts or angels with wings, but through ordinary people who decide, in small ways, to be kind. Through hands that fix instead of break, voices that defend the voiceless, and hearts that keep loving even when life feels impossible. If you're watching this story, maybe that same light is waiting in you. Maybe the miracle you've been praying for begins with one act of compassion you can give today. A meal for someone hungry, a word for someone broken, forgiveness for someone who doesn't deserve it. Share this story if it touched you. Leave a comment about a moment when faith found you in an unexpected place. Subscribe if you believe that miracles still happen, not in distant heavens, but here, between us, in the lives we choose to heal. May God bless every heart that watches, every hand that helps, and every soul still searching for light. And may you too carry that light forward, because sometimes the smallest spark is enough to save a world.